Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. Languages are important for telling computers what to do. Computers are important for reminding humans how languages can be ambiguous, illogical, and incomplete. That's why the quality of a language isn't so much about its syntax and semantics, but in the meaning that we can convey with it. This holds true for most languages, even fictional ones like Klingon and Perl. Which means this week we chat with Daniel Stenberg about curating curl over several decades to keep its source code successful and secure. Kapla! And stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest Appsec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. This is episode 320, recorded March 3rd, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shima. I'm here with Kalyani Pawar. Hello, Kalyani.
Hey, everyone.
I won't force you into any Klingon yourself, but I don't think our mics can handle it. We do have someone else here joining us, Daniel Stenberg, who's a Swedish internet protocol expert, which I think underplays a lot of this, and a developer who has participated in and worked in open source for 30 years. He's most known for being the founder and lead developer of the curl project, one of the world's most widely used software components. He also participates in protocol development within the IETF and has authored books on curl, open source, HTTP2, HTTP3, and more. Hello, Daniel. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Good to be here.
Now, of course, Sweden, I'm going to have to go to the cliche. People think ABBA, but there's also Roxette, there's Covenant. But, all told, those have made it to maybe a few hundred million stereos. How many devices has curl made it onto?
How many has it not gone to? I usually go with the estimate of 20 billion installations, but it's really hard to make any, accurate estimations. It's just an estimate.
Just an estimate, but I think that estimate gives us a good sense that of both the success, the longevity, and the security that curl needs to maintain in order to keep that, to keep these decades going. And what caught my attention over 2024 were some unhelpful dimensions of application security and curl. So I do want to start, let's start a little bit on the downer, and hopefully we'll end on a high note. Let's see. But at the beginning of 2024, curl has a bug bounty program, but you were getting a lot of bad bug bounty reports. They, not in the sense of poor grammar, poor syntax for that matter, speaking of language, but just things that were off. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yes. So basically the trend of LLMs have really, it has really shown in our bug bounty systems, because I think it is very tempting for people to ask their AIs to help them find problems, or the AI then very confidently tell them that there is a problem somewhere and then they use the LLM to generate a bug report, and here's a really important security thing somewhere in here, blah blah blah. And potentially there could be, right? But in our cases, we have still yet to find an actual security problem that someone found with an AI. Usually they produce a very big report in very good English that sounds realistic and plausible, and it takes actually quite a lot of work to debunk it and figure out what exactly is going on in there. I think what it has typically also made it a little bit harder is that in many cases when we work with people across the globe, right, we're all not using English as our first language. So potentially some of these users could just use an AI for translations, right, or producing a message. So just because it sounds like an AI, it doesn't mean, it could just be a translation service somewhere through communication channels. So I don't want to just dismiss it outright just because it sounds like a machine. So it's a little bit like that. But then of course going back and forth when I ask follow-up questions, and you can just you can feel that it's an AI in the other end. So just the user just feeding my answers or my questions into the AI, and it feeds back the answers, and then at some point it just goes crazy.
Yeah, crazy. Well, and it's got to drive you crazy, because you made a very good point that as an assistant for English language for communication, an LLM seems like a good fit for it. But if it's just making something up about curl, there's a lot of burden. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what does it mean. Let's say you've had some correct bug bounty reports in the past too, but correct or incorrect, what is that burden? What does it mean to have to figure out this is here's a Stack Overflow or here's some other logic bug, and you have to verify it?
Well, I think first of all, a security problem is one of the most prioritized in the project. So of course it makes everything else somewhat halts, because that if we get a report and we get them like on average, I think we get 2 a week or so. So we get the report, and then we of course need to figure out what it is, because it could potentially be a security problem, and that security problem could be important. So yes, we pretty much put that as a top priority to consider. So of course, the more junk we get, the more we get interrupted from what we actually wanted to do today, and instead we get to spend it reading AI outputs and dismiss it. And I mean, even an AI or a regular report, it could be quite a lot of work to actually figure out if it is a problem. I mean, it could potentially be a bug. Is it a security related bug? And if it is security related bug, what's the outcome here? What's the severity? What's the worst thing you can do with this? And that takes some, thinking and deliberating over the details and reading code.
Well, and that's because there's, what the number's roughly 180,000 lines, but reading through your blog, even those lines of code have, I think your number was every line of code is changed at least 3 times over the lifetime of curl. So I don't think even you are able to keep all of the, the code in your head, right? So yeah, how do you do this?
I certainly don't keep it in my head. It's actually 1.14 War and Peace in number of words. So it's a lot of code, but I'm very familiar with the layout and the system, how it works, so and how it should work, the sort of the architecture and everything. So of course I have a pretty good understanding, so I know where to get a start and so on, and then of course I just read the code and familiarize myself with it when I need to check it out. So usually that's not the problem. It's more like what kind of input is required for this kind of effect to happen. Can that input actually get triggered by an outsider, an attacker somehow, or is it just a mistake? Is it documented? Is it an abuse of an API somewhere or stuff like that? So all of those different things. And if it is a problem, what's the worst thing that can happen? And then just reading code, figure out what can happen if this weird thing happens. And back again, then we write curl in C, right? So we have things like potential buffer overflows. It could be a potential stack buffer overflow that could lead to code execution or whatever, really, in the worst possible outcomes.
Yeah, and I do want to come back to the idea, the impact and severity. But since you brought up C, that's one of those things that, curl is, I'm not sure how best to frame this, notorious, famous, infamous for being stubborn, persistent, or I will say positively successful with C. Why haven't you rewritten it? And everybody loves Rust these days. Why haven't you spent the weekend to write it in Rust?
Yeah, so I don't want to rewrite it in any language. So there's a little bit of my, I think a good sort of one of the reasons or explanations why we have succeeded so far is that we don't rewrite anything. We just, keep polishing, and that's why we have rewritten every line 3 times, because we keep polishing and just reiterating, polishing, refactoring, and over time it becomes good. So we just keep at it for decades. So I don't mean to rewrite it in any language, not in C either. And then the other, so rewriting is a pretty big venture to do into any language, and you would introduce a lot of bugs in that procedure, so in that process. So switching to another language, that would be a huge thing. So, and then there are actually many reasons why I wouldn't do it. So of course, Rust hasn't really been a viable option for many years. So it was basically just a modern thing that we could have started to do it, and then we would have to have the expertise to do it. And we're a C shop here already, right? You said it already. I've been working with C for over 30 years. This is, I have it in my spine. I don't have Rust in my spine. I couldn't do. So I'm not the right person to rewrite it in the Rust either. And then of course, curl runs everywhere, literally on pretty much any operating system you can imagine, and a lot more than you can imagine. And that's because it's written in C. It's really easy to compile it and run it on anything you want. And say what you want about Rust, is a cool language, but it's not as portable as C.
No,
so that's part of the reasons why, really.
And part of that too, with writing code, there's also the aspect that you're not just writing the code, you're of course writing the test cases to test the code, to understand, is the protocol working? But those test cases obviously are missing something if there are security bugs, or just call them software quality bugs. So what does it feel like? Are you like, oh, if only this test found this, or was there something wrong with the test? Well, how does that feel?
Yeah, and every time someone reports a security problem, it's not only that, obviously we should have a test for this particular case that someone reported, because so many times when someone reports the problem, then you of course realize the stupidity of doing it this way, and how come we didn't write a test case for exactly this? It seems so obvious when someone pointed it out to us. So of course it's always that, and always that sense of sometimes just how stupid are we? That's so obvious. One of these things that, that's typo in the middle. Of course, we should have seen it. And a bunch of people have read this code a number of times, but we still had it in there. And, the average age for a CVE, the code says every time someone reports a CVE, I go back and look at when was this bug introduced. So I know how many days the code has been wrong, right? And the average time is somewhere around 3,000 days. It's like 8 years on average, right, that the bug has been there. So it's not like there's been a lot of eyes on the code that no one saw it, and we've all extended test cases for years, but no one caught it. So of course it feels like, how come this happened? And then we add a test, and we hope that sure, that now we have tests, surely we won't have another bug, but it just keeps on adding things. And anyway, and in curl is really more of a literally like a Swiss Army knife of things, right? We have so many different options and tweaks and everything, which makes it really, really hard to test all those combinations and all different angles and twists that you can do it. And back again then to the 20 billion installations, right? There are so many users with so many different use cases and so many different internet servers and setups and everything. So there are so many different ways to do things. So testing is certainly a challenge, and we do our best, but we are also always aware that there's a unknown amount of things that we don't test and we can't test. We just have to be open for them to potentially be problems in there somewhere.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I think because the number of command line options is just under 260. So that alone, just figure out some combinatorial way of testing what users could come up with.
Yes, exactly.
I wanted to chime in real quick, and I really like your insights about testing, but I think what particularly grabbed my attention is again C, and the raging success of curl, right? You said it's running almost every operating system now, 106 to quote correctly, right? And do you think this cross-platform compatibility, for lack of a better term, is one of the underrated reasons why curl will always be preferred in C, which is slightly, lesser secure option in today's world?
I think that the curl's ability to run exactly the same on so many platforms is certainly one of the key features of it, and that what makes it sort of attractive to users, because even you can, for example, if you build a fridge or a printer or a TV or whatever you want to do, and you want to have curl in it, you can write your own, set up your test application on Linux or on Windows and use the same API. And it's very easy for you to develop there, debug there maybe, and just move your application over to something else. And I think that is an attractive feature with curl and the libcurl API and everything. So yeah, I think that is important part. And that's one of the key things I don't want to go away. So I want it to be there.
And it's very, from an AppSec perspective, it's very easy for the AppSec community just to be like, oh, it's written in C, it's insecure. That's a very naive approach, because I think you have chosen some philosophies and made some choices to figure out how to use C in a way that's effective and secure. And there's easy things like don't use getS, don't use sprintf, some of the infamous types of functions. What are some other things that make you feel comfortable remaining in C? Setting aside, we don't want anybody to rip your spine out and try to replace it with, some Terminator Rust or something.
Yeah. So, yes, it is C, and we are very aware of that. Yes, it's vulnerable to some problems that other languages are not. So we have to do our best. So we try to do everything we can to write it as safe as we can. We ban a bunch of functions, of course, getS or sprintf, and a bunch of other functions. I think the list is nowadays on 20 functions or something that we actively ban from the code. And then we do things like we have a set of helper functions to help us do things that we want to do often, so that we avoid the worst footgums in C. For example, realloc is one of these things that we typically historically have found that we did wrong many times in the past, and just things like that. And then we of course do everything we can, as in adding tests, doing fuzzing, doing code analyzers, and whatever we can we throw at it, and we fix every warning, every defect, everything that any tool finds suspicious or maybe not ideal, then we fix that, and we try to make sure that we tighten every bolt that we can. But sure, it's still C, so we still slip up every now and then. So it still happens. But we're down at, right now, since I then keep this record of every CVE, I know that we're at 40% what I call C mistakes out of all the CVEs. So we're still at, that means that 6 out of 10 are not because of C, they're because of other logical mistakes, because security is still hard.
It is, and that security is still hard. That might be our motto now for the podcast. But I wanted to really reinforce that point, because if you had rewritten it into a different language, those logic problems would not have go away. The state machine for a protocol is going to be possibly same implementation problems, or just the same ambiguity in the protocol itself that's hard to code around. And here I want to bring in that idea of the impact, like how many of those are really bad versus this is just software quality to fix it. Because there was another blog article you wrote last year around CVSS, and how, another way the AppSec community hasn't been as helpful as it could be. Tell us a little bit about the CVS experience in curl.
So CVEs in general is a good idea, and it gives us all a unique ID to have as an identifier for a single flaw, or for a specific flaw, really. And nothing really competes with CVE these days. And so we have the CVEs, and everyone who gets a security problem registers the CVE, and there's a database there maintained by MITRE. And we, in the curl project, we became a CNA recently, so we are now a CVE numbering authority, so that we can register and submit our own CVEs. That also means that we can reject if someone else tries to submit a CVE for curl, because we've had problems with that too in the past. But now we're now sort of masters of our own domain. But that means that when we submit the CVE now, we don't set a CVSS score, because I feel that CVSS scores are so fragile and hard to use and hard to set. And so often when we try to set a CVSS score, we end up with a score that we really can't agree with. But mostly because I think we lack sort of those important metrics. Or, when you pick up one of these CVSS calculators things and you click on all those different checkboxes and everything, and out comes a score, right? But you can feel that, wait a minute, where's these different checkboxes for the other factors that are not even related, or I feel are related, but are not part of this calculator? So when I get one of these problems and I get a score that doesn't at all reflect my feeling for this problem. So pretty much we've had that sentiment, and in the curl project we just feel that, so we don't think that the CVSS scores ever reflect actually what we feel about this problem. So we nowadays, or actually since years back, we just set a single severity out of 4 levels, like low, medium, high, or critical. And the only reason we set those really is that we have a bug bounty that is based on those levels. So we have to do at least those levels. Still, that is problematic when you make a library that runs everywhere, right? So it's probably quite different if you use libcurl in a toaster or in a space rocket, right? It should possibly be different, but we still have to just make it one of those 4s, medium or low. But when we do that, and then we submit that to MITRE, and it ends up in a database, and we haven't set a CVSS score. And the entire world nowadays is so keen on getting that score, because
give me a number.
What do you mean no score? How can we tell if this is an important thing or not then? So in the past, NVD did this, and nowadays CISA does it. So they have taken it upon themselves to set scores for CVs without scores. So they extract all the CVs, they figure out which ones don't have score, and they go through them and set a score. And how do they set a score for problems that we report? I don't know, but they do that. So they suddenly they say, hey, this is 9.4. Out of what? How do you know that? Recently when I reported one of these bugs, 2024-11-053, so CISA came out and they set 9.1 on the CV for us. So, but scary. I had set it low, on severity low, so that our lowest score, and 9.1, that's really high for a low. and the result then, when they set such a high score, is that other users of the database, they notice that, and they go out and do things. And in particular, in this case, several security websites started to post articles about this severe problem in curl 9.1. The sky is falling kind of thing. So someone emailed me a link to one of these articles, curl 9.1 security, and I had, what do you mean 9.1? We haven't had any critical security problem in over a decade. So what is this? So then I checked out the CISA score, and now they have it in GitHub now. So I can just check out their JSON for and figure out their CVSS calculator thing for this. So I submitted an update to them, but I said, hey, I entered some values in here. I think it should be 5 point something maximum. Then they took them an hour or so to respond to that, and then they updated it to 3.4, I think. I think, it doesn't really matter what the scores are here, but it just shows the ridiculousness of everything. Apparently it was 9 in the morning. A few hours later, it was 3, and nothing had changed, right? So what is this? So
it's got to be tough to deal with. It sounds like you're setting up that riddle, a CVSS in the morning, this in the afternoon, and this in the evening. But there's even if we get some listeners who are thinking, oh, but CVSS has a temporal dimension to it or an environmental dimension, I think those still can't capture the context of just what you were describing. 20 billion devices, so many different toasters versus spaceships.
Yeah, and really, you can argue that, there are all these other factors that you should count in with CVSS. Sure, but are they? No, they're not, right? Since these scores are then taken as sort of the truth by an entire universe of different security scanners and tools everywhere, and those scores are going to be used as sort of the truth for how important this is, even if it really shouldn't. So down the line, then people will email me when they find out that they run blah blah blah, and they find curl, version blah, and it has this really really serious security problem in it. What should I do? And no, you don't, and I don't know what to do.
Speaking of CVSs and how dystopian it can be with the higher numbers that CISA is giving, I have a nightmarish question for you, which is like, after curl has been running for over decades now, almost everywhere, and is there any long-term security nightmare that you have, something that would jeopardize trust in curl, just like it did with Log4Shell? Anything nightmarish, anything dystopian?
Well, I guess there's always a risk that there is a problem somewhere that no one has thought about, and that could then become something bad. Like in all of those cases, Heartbleed, Log4Shell, or even XZ case, but I spend a lot of thinking and a lot of efforts into all of that. I mean, we already talked about how to find bugs in code, right? But it goes beyond finding bugs in code. It goes into what if a maintainer lands code that because someone threatened him to do it, or if there's an XZ maintainer somewhere that just suddenly turns bad one day, or all the way until even more, if someone threatens me to do bad stuff, what can I do? And so we all have to pretty much, we have a lot of different things to make sure that whatever we do, we can always we work so that we can detect problems, whoever does it at whatever point in the chain that we do development. So I actually don't have any. I mean, there could potentially be nightmare situations, but I think we do a lot to make sure that they don't happen. And I think it's really, really hard for someone to do it deliberately to us. And that's why I think what is left is our own mistakes. I mean, as in security problems, the ones we already do, we do stupid bugs and they can sometimes be exploited somehow so that something bad can happen. And I think that is still the worst stuff that can happen. And that is really sort of, sure, that's Log4Shell. If we could do something, a really bad bug, don't have any tests for it, no one spots the obvious problem, and then we ship it.
Daniel, your whole story, it makes me think about, like, I'm thinking of a story right now, which makes me think like maintainers are like this guardians of this really nice, tool that we made. And so how can we, as, cult followers of curl, help you, feel less anxious about these security issues?
I don't know. I think generally, I think we just need help to make sure that we stay alert and we keep, in shape. So that I need people to report problems when they find them, right? So that's why I generally like having a bug bounty, because it gives us people all the time telling us potential problems that we've done, or mistakes that we have done, or things that we should do better, and so on. So I think that we can't never really relax. We're never done. We don't ever reach any goal really, because it's an endless journey towards the eternity, right? So we just have to keep doing things the right way. And of course, doing things over all the time, every day, of course, there's a risk that we just at some point slip up, because that's what humans do. But then we make sure that we have guardrails everywhere. So I think we just need to make sure that we have enough eyes and enough hands on the code and all the procedures around it, so that we can detect when we slip up and fix the guardrails when it's broken, and then just move on. And over time, fix everything even better, add more tests, add more tools, and make things even better over time. So I think we generally have gone in that direction for the last, for a very long time. And I think we're going to continue in that trajectory for a very long time too, because we're not done and there are always more things to do, and we can always improve in pretty much every aspect. Even though I think we're pretty good in most aspects, I think we can still usually improve in almost all of them.
And a lot of everything you were describing there too is very much about people, about processes. Those ideas of trust or even coercion, these types of threats, once again, just those are independent of whether this is written in C or something else. And I also wanted to highlight this aspect that you've been, I say you, but this is more of the, not even the royal you, speaking of the cult following that Kalyani referred to, more of the group you, in the sense of the community behind curl. From my perspective, from the outside, curl has that longevity, a very healthy community, and a very large community. And I'm curious what you've done to foster that, advice for other open source projects, as well as things that you would still love to see others participate in with your own project.
Well, I think curl, the curl project has in common with most projects that we, of course, want it to be larger and want to welcome more people. So we're always trying. So a general concept is to try to lower the bar and remove friction for newcomers to contribute or to just, feel welcomed in a project. So that's something we just need to do, put an effort into, so that, and just do a project the way we want it to be when we arrive in a new project somewhere. So, and remove bureaucracy or weird things in the project and just make it fun to contribute and easy to do that, and say thank you to those when they contribute things, and give credit to the ones who are doing the work, and so on. So I think I've always just tried to be welcoming and be friendly, and the way I want it to be when I show up in a project somewhere.
Well, this has been a wonderful, hopefully you feel that we've been welcoming to you, but you've been very friendly to us, answering all of our questions, Daniel. As we start to wrap up here, I want to give a chance. Is there anything that you would love to draw attention to, whether you've got your own upcoming presentations or just some other resources for our listeners?
No, not really. I think whatever you want in the curl project, just go to curl.sc and follow. If you want to participate in the project, there are some introductory documentations on how to get started and helping out, and there's a lot to do always. I get that feedback a lot from people actually who say that, sure, curl has been around for soon 27 years in a few days. But we still need help, right? We're still not done. We develop things all the time at quite a rapid pace. So even though we've been around forever, we do things, and most of the stuff work. We still do a lot of things, and we still appreciate help to do.
Yeah, I think too that is also the part of the website calls out not just help for coding, but help for documentation, help for testing environments, things like that. So I just wanted to highlight and basically reinforce what you were saying. The other thing is, what is it? March 10th is going to be the next. Is that the birthday of curl? So we've got about a week, right?
March 20th.
March 20th,
I think. Yeah.
March 20th. Okay.
And that's the birthday of curl. I have this.
That's right,
Sometimes 20th. I struggle a little bit because I started with everything before curl, right? I renamed it curl in March 20, 1998. So that's for the curl itself. That's 27 years soon.
Speaking of birthdays, Daniel, you'll be, proud to know that I have an older sibling and a younger one, and all three of us have used curl. That's how impactful curl has been in our lives.
Lovely.
I think, and we look forward to seeing curl be impactful for another quarter century and forward. So you've conquered Earth. We wait, let's see Mars, the Moon. There's a couple other satellites in orbit out there. Natural satellites you can go take on.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the confirmation of it being on the moon, because I've been told that it's likely on the moon soon, and it was involved in the Mars landing, right? So it's slowly going beyond Earth.
This is wonderful. Daniel, one last thing I do want to squeeze in here. We do ask all of our guests to describe AppSec in 3 words. So love to hear your perspective on this.
Okay, I'm going with hard, important, and interesting.
I don't think anybody can argue with that. And you've definitely made this interview interesting for us. I just want to say thank you once again for this. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you to Kalyani as well. We're going to take a quick break now and return with news of the week.